In this video, we're going to talk about materials in 3ds Studio Max. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about lights and how you can create the different types of lights in 3ds Max and in using Arnold renderer, which is the default renderer at the moment in 3ds Max. And we also created what is called a mesh light, which is a light that is gonna take the shape of an object. So whatever object we're gonna select, that's gonna become an actual light. So we talk about all the different effects that we can have with lights, and also we saw how we can apply the IES file, which is kind of a particular effect to have a more realistic spotlight, and also how we can create a light projecting an image, which is similar to what we do with materials. With materials, we use textures, which are basically images inside the material, to lay out the material on a surface. So it's like basically projecting something on a surface, essentially, but it's not like a light, it's something similar. So we saw the different effects here, also how to create some interesting like black and white movies, noir movies like Venetian blinds, and you can project using you can see here different type of lights. We talked about the 3-point lighting system, how we can improve the three-dimensionality of the scene and using the key light, the fill light, and the backlight, which you are seeing right now. We also saw that we can change the resolution of the interactive rendering so that we can switch from a less quality and faster rendering or a higher quality preview, but it's going to be slower. So I'm going to use the faster. So it's going to have more performance and less quality, because in this case we can be quicker. But if you have a strong computer, you can definitely use the higher resolution settings. So talking about the mesh light that we were talking before, we can see the effect of the light by the reflections on the floor. So we are actually emitting light from a really low intensity light from this mesh, but the object itself is not an emissive object. So what we can do here is create an emissive material. The emissive material is one of the easiest to create. So you see here, I opened up this slate material editor. We can have the different scene materials right here. We can get it from here. So whatever we create, we can find it here. Whatever we import as object with textures, we can find the texture right here and the material right here. So it's a really handy tool to manage the material. Now you have two ways you can manage materials. You have the slate material editor, which is this one right here, and it's a little bit more advanced for like advanced user because it has a lot of nodes and complex structure. We're gonna see that later on. And then we have the compact material editor, which is more compact basically. So it's also more user friendly in my opinion, and it was like the old fashioned material editor of 3ds Max. So I'm gonna use both. So for old users, they're gonna start from here. New user can see this one here and also the new slate material. Now you can go here and restore anytime this panel, and you can just click and drag there and you will see the material applied onto your object. So it's just a click and drag. It's the fastest way we can apply a material. And now this material is nothing fancy. It's a physical material. 3ds Max uses PBR, which are physically based render materials, and uses all the parameters that we can find in PBR materials. And we're gonna go through all these basic parameters in this first video. Then we're gonna move on and talk about the textures and the more complex parameters. But essentially, in the basic section here, you have the basic effects of a material, which are like transparency, reflections, and you can see here also emission. So if I use the white instead of the black, we can already see that our object now is actually like a lamp. It's not a dark object, but it's a really bright object emitting white light. So this is the way we can create emissive materials, which also contribute to global illumination. Now, we talked about global illumination, direct lighting, and indirect lighting. Now, materials are also reacting to light. So light is really important when we need to study materials. And of course, to create a nice scene, you need to consider materials, lights, and the render settings. Now you can see here, I changed the color. You can set up the luminance in the emission channel so you can create an emissive material. Now, talking about PBR materials, physically based render materials, they behave again like real materials in real life, which actually react to light in some sort of way. So if you can see here that the most important thing is reflection or specularity, because every material in reality, one way or the other, just reflect light or makes the light bounce around. And depending on how it bounces on a surface, and again, this is also related to direct and indirect illumination, is gonna react in one way or another. So you can see the specular, so a more glossy material is gonna have like one direction reflection. The diffuse effect is gonna be like a scattered effect on the surface. Also, the roughness, it's another term to define this behavior. So when the light hits the surface and it's gonna be like not reflected in one direction, but in many different directions, you're gonna have like a rough surface effect or a diffuse effect. When it's more concentrated, you're gonna have more glossiness. Now, also, these are two terms that you need to keep in mind: roughness and glossiness, which are basically one the opposite of the other. In terms of textures, we're gonna see later on that a glossiness texture is basically the inverse of a roughness texture. So these are the basic channels, the basic parameters that we need to consider when creating a material. We need to know if it's glossy or if it's not, or if it is something in between. So you can have like all shades of gray in this case, because we're always talking about black and white values, which represent 0 and 1. Now, when the light passes through the surface, it's gonna have a subsurface scattering or transparency or refraction. These are all similar terms, and they show the light how it's gonna behave after it goes underneath the surface. So whether it's gonna go all the way through, and so you can create a really transparent material, or it's gonna stay a little bit inside the material. That's gonna be subsurface scattering. So it's gonna be scattered underneath the surface inside the material, like skin or wax or materials like that. So when it goes through all the way, you're gonna have glasses, or water or liquids or anything that is not opaque, but is gonna be transparent or translucent. And by changing the IOR, it's a value that is gonna define the index of refraction, which means how much that effect is going to be shown, the refraction, which is kind of a distortion of the light passing through an object. Distortion of the light and of whatever is on the back of that object. Now, I created here a really simple scene. It's a photographic studio again, set up so I have a floor, a back wall there, and some lights. Again, to test the materials, you need to have lights. So you can click and drag and apply again the material. Is going to be a standard gray or light gray effect. It's also going to have some sort of glossiness already, so we can see this going to be reflecting the light a little bit. Now everything it's in there, everything it's on these basic parameters that we are now going to see one by one and try to create different materials like metals, plastic, glasses, and you can see there the base color, that's the color there, which is a gray, and the roughness right now is at 1, so it's really high. So if I see here, you can also see in the reflection the roughness is pretty high. So if I set that to 1, it's gonna be total rough surface, so I'm not gonna see any specular effect. If I go the other way and I say glossiness, so it's gonna be the opposite. Is 1, it means it's gonna be a really glossy object. Now remember that 1 represents the white or 100%. 0 is black, so it's like 0% of glossiness in this case. So you can see it's a total diffuse material, kind of like wax, or not wax actually because it's not translucent yet, but kind of plaster, or some rough plastic, some really basic material, some paint, not glossy paint. So by addressing the glossiness or the roughness, we can create already the first effects. Now you can see that you can start to play with these different values. So you either work with the value from 0 to 1, or work with the color, or when you see those little square next to the value, you can add a texture. So later we're going to use texture, which are more complex than simple values or simple colors. Now you see also metalness here. So when I set the roughness to 0, glossiness to 1, and metalness also, I'm gonna set this higher, I'm gonna have a metal. So you can see here, if I increase this, I'm gonna have a more metallic look. Now what you see here in the preview is not the actual material. You always need to run the render to see the final result, but we can get a pretty much good idea of what is happening here. So you can see again, if I turn down the roughness or turn up the glossiness, I'm gonna have really different effects. So this is more like a mirror effect. It's a total glossy, totally specular. If I increase the roughness, it's gonna be more like a brushed metal. And again, you can see when I run the rendering, I can actually see the metal there. So I need to run a render, even if it's a draft, but I need to run a render. I can run it here in the viewport, or I can run the render frame, but I need to do that. So also we can see some black reflections, because everything except but the background here and the floor will be totally black. So our environment right now is totally black, and this is not really good for reflection. So I'm copying here, I'm mirroring these set, because then I can have more interesting reflections. But later on we will see that we can work with the environment to have more realistic reflections, and so also more realistic materials. So this is just, again, the beginning, and you will have the full picture when you will see all the part concerning materials, all the part concerning rendering, and you already saw the lighting part, of course. So you can see here I'm playing around with the glossiness, the roughness, the metalness, and the base color, and I am creating more effects. So you can also insert the names there, type the name that you want to give when you create a material. If you click and drag a sphere onto another sphere, you're going to create a copy. Now you can see here I want to create a perfect mirror, or something really glossy. So I'm going to turn down the roughness and turn up the metalness and glossiness. And you can also have a lot of presets here you can use. So all these physical materials, they come with a pack of material that you can use. And you have buttons on the right. They can help you to add a background to the sphere, so that you can see if it's actually reflecting or if it's transparent, and so on. Now I'm also going to create some copies to test different types of material, from plastic to mirror to chrome to metal to transparent, and so on. So I suggest you can do this just to experiment and test out the material, so that you can learn how they behave, how they're gonna look into your scene. And later on we will also see some more rendering techniques which can help you to save time. And well, before you run the final render, make sure that the material is what you expected. So you need to run some like really high quality tests before you run the whole scene. Now we can see here we have a bunch of buttons on the toolbar that can be interesting. So go there. Some of those can select the object by material, or do some really interesting commands. Now you can also apply the material using the tools at the bottom. You can open new libraries containing ready-made materials. You can save libraries, you can open libraries, you can see also here the scene materials, and you can display the material on and the texture by clicking on that button. And again, you have a lot of presets that you can start with. Just open them, click them, apply them, and then you can modify them, customize them, really easy. So if you don't want to bother to learn all the theory here and all those notions, you can just go there, assign a preset, and then customize it real quick. So you have presets for wood or plastic or metal or concrete. So you can just go there, apply it, and modify it. So this is a quick way if you don't want to, dedicate time to study this. So also remember, lighting is really important. Everything it's based on the lighting that you're using. So the better the lighting, the better is going to be the result of your material. So I'm continuing to copy many different statues. So I am trying different materials, different combinations of parameters. Again, I'm going to click and drag, apply the material. And let's see some rough concrete. So probably rough concrete is going to be a real rough material. Then I have polished concrete. And let's try this one. You get the idea. So you can just go there and apply it. Now let's go to a new one, new sphere, and let's see something else. Well, you can see there all the part, masonry, rubber, the part of the glass. So you have transparent materials. You're gonna have a glass. So again, you can, if you don't see the glass, you can activate the checkerboard in the background, or just click and apply it onto the scene. And let's see also, well, you have glass, thin geometry, and solid geometry. These are pretty similar, but usually when you have a full object like this, you want to show it like something filled with that glass, you can use the solid. When you want to show something that it's empty inside, you can use the thin glass. So, and these are just the physical materials again of 3ds Max. You can use these with whatever render engine you want to use. So before that we had like standard materials and other type of materials, but now this is the standard. PBR is the standard right now. And there you go. So you can see here all the parameters. You can study this, how they have been set up with the roughness, with the translucency, if they're transparent. And you can see you can apply the roughness also to the transparency if you want like frosted glass or something that is not really perfectly neat and clean. And you can see the option there also, thin walled. Again, when you have a really thin surface of the glass, you should use that, or perhaps only one surface, not a real solid. You should use the thin glass effect. Otherwise, a really thick object of glass is going to distort a lot what's behind. You can try it with a sphere. Try with a sphere, try solid, and try the thin glass. And again, let's check out some other material here. And also, I'm gonna suggest you an additional tool here. If we go in Google, we can search for Arnold Material Library. And this is a library that you can download and use and study again. These are all presets for you. And these are actually Arnold materials. So we saw how we can quickly create the PBR or physically physical materials in 3ds Max, but Arnold has its own way to create materials, which is pretty similar. It stands on the same concepts. It's gonna have the same basics. So roughness, glossiness, diffuse. So once you understand the logic of PBR, you can use that logic in every render engine out there that uses the same. So you can see I can click and download. This library is gonna be like a zipped file. So you need to extract it, and there it is. So by the way, this is also a way you can save your own library. This is a library, so you can save it and open from, again, the compact material editor. You click on the get material button there, and you click and on the arrow and say open, and just like that you can also save it. So once you save it, you can also open it when you have your own material. So I'm just going to navigate into that folder and select that file and open it up, and there you go. So I have all these Max 2A material, which are all Arnold materials ready made for you, set up for you, and you can just click and drag directly from the list into the scene. You can see here I'm just like substituting. Some of these are subsurface scattering materials like blood or wax. They are also they contain the subsurface scattering effect, and also you can use the picker when you want to select a material from the scene. Always run a render to see the actual results, especially when you work with glasses and reflections. You wanna check that using the actual rendering. Now, if I select an empty sphere, you can see I have the picker. I can click on an object and I can retrieve that material. And you can see this is a standard surface, and it's a little bit different from the previous material, but it contains pretty much the same thing. So base color, roughness, and so on. So if I select another one here, let's get, instead of Max 2A, let's directly go now into Arnold materials. So if I go to materials, you have all the different possibilities there in general. And in Arnold, you have the Arnold materials, which the standard one is going to be called standard surface. So standard surface is an Arnold material. So I can click and drag, apply it, and this is the standard. So it's a light gray, white material again. It has the base color, the roughness. It has some advanced features like acoustics, which are like for transparent materials. You have the specular, which is basically the glossiness value. So you can increase it, you can set a color. Remember that white means a lot of glossiness or a lot of roughness or a lot of metalness, whatever. So it's gonna, white is gonna mean 1, black is gonna mean 0. And this is also going to come back talking about the textures. So you can see there, if I go all the way down to the roughness, again, I have that mirror effect. And then I have transmission, which means transparency. So transmission, it's about transparency, but I need to turn down the metalness, otherwise it's gonna be too reflective, so I can't see the transparent. And you can see that applying a background to your sphere will help you to understand whether it's a transparent material or a reflective material, and so on. So there you go. So let's activate the background, and this is probably too, you can see there it's either too rough, too white, so it's not a clean glass. So I need to go in the transmission section, see if everything is right there. Now let's select, you can see this is another translucent material, and it has is not using subsurface scattering. You can see there down there all the subsurface scattering values. So again, my suggestion is first study how these presets are made so that you can then proceed by your own. Now coat is another layer that is going to be on top and to represent again an extra glossiness on top, like a film that is going to be applied. The sheen is an effect which is more for fabric and velvet, so it's for like simulating kind of different glossiness onto the surface. And then if we go all the way down, we can see all the maps that we can use. Now you can see that these are really a lot, and on the right side, that's the part where you can essentially insert a texture, but we're gonna talk about texture later on. Just want to stay here with the basic things, and we're gonna move on to more complex things and textures in the next video. So again, we're gonna go back to the physical. You see also here we have coating parameters. So like applying an extra layer on top of what we already defined here. So you can see there always be like similar things in physical materials and in Arnold. They both are PBR materials, so they share a lot of things that they have in common. So they may be called differently, like reflection instead of specular, transmission instead of transparency, but they all do the same thing. You either set a color. Now black means it doesn't have reflections. White means it's going to have a lot of reflection. So you either change color or the value, the one that you can use in that case. So this is the first thing you can do. And also choose if you want to use glossiness or roughness. And this is going to be one the opposite of the other. Now I'm going to select again this other material, which is jade, and I can start to change here, and you can see that if I make the specular black, it's going to become a rough surface. So again, another demonstration of how you can work either with colors or with values. Now when you apply a texture, you're gonna have not a uniform color, but you're gonna have like a combination of pixels of different shades of gray and white and black, and those are gonna represent the behavior of the material, which is not gonna be uniform. It's gonna be based on that texture. And you can do that basically with anything that has the texture map icon available. So in the usually all those little checkbox like that you find on the right, those will be for applying a texture, and that's the sheen effect right there. You can see it in the preview. It's pretty visible. So it's a different type of again response to the light. It's the different reaction to the light, which is gonna look more soft, kind of a hair, small hair layer on top of the object. And again, you can customize all of these here. So I'm changing here the coating, which is going to be an extra layer on top, and can contain also the bump, which is a texture for the superficial 3D superficial relief of an object. So all those tiny details, but we're gonna see that because we can get the bump effect only with the texture. So there are some effects like bump or cutouts or displacement that you can only get if you apply a texture. So some of these values can be used also like this in a really standard fashion, only with the colors and only with the values. Other channels of the materials, other effects of the materials, you can only get them with the textures. So let's switch back to the slate material editor just to show you that you can do the basic things also here. So you click and drag to edit a particular material from a library or from the scene. You can access the parameters on the right, just like we did in the compact material editor. And when you're gonna start to use texture, you're gonna start to see connections and nodes. So you can see that I have scene material there on the bottom. So you can always retrieve a material, click and drag, create an instance so that's linked to the original, and then you can manage the material here and all the layers. And if you click and drag out from that little dots on the left, you're gonna start to work with textures or other effects and nodes that you can use. So we're definitely gonna come back later to see also how a material with texture looks, but you saw that the standard material, a really simple material, is just gonna have that central node and it's gonna be really simple. So we're gonna stop here. That's it for this lesson. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.